It'll be really interesting if you pick up the wrong set of glasses. If I tip them this way, can you tell the difference? Until you go out and get behind the wheel of your car.
That's right. That would be a problem. Uh-oh.
Oh, I was going to say, I have a whole bunch of, speaking of...
And if you do, please join us as we talk about all things paranormal, as we leap into Paranormal Crossings. Paranormal Crossings. Paranormal Crossings.
Rockin' credits.
Hello and welcome to Paranormal Crossings. I'm your host, Aaron Collins.
Elise
And
Wells.
Elise Wells. We have a very special guest in the studio today, and that would be who?
Who? I don't know. You tell me.
You didn't bring Boo.
I didn't bring Boo.
You know, every time you don't bring Boo, it gets really emotional for me.
I know.
Because I really like Boo. Next week. Boo's
Yes.
going to come back next week. So, well, we've got some exciting guests coming up. We've got, aside from our awesome guest, I've been wanting to interview this guy for a long time. And so I'm very excited. I'm trying to contain myself.
I know. You said
So-
you've wanted to for a
I
long
have,
time. You've talked
yeah.
about him a lot.
Back in the PJ days with Blog Talk, yeah. I wanted to do that. So, anyways, it's been a while. But we've got some other great guests coming up on the show. Next Thursday, we have the curator, Michael P. Jones from Shanghai Tunnels. And following that, we've got some other exciting guests that we will reveal at a later date.
Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun. Somebody from across the pond, all the way from England. And so we'll announce who that is later. And then later, we have some other celebrity guests in the paranormal field that we'll get into at another time. But we have our own local celebrity who's here today.
Yay.
And his name is Jeff Davis. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me here.
We
Yeah.
appreciate it again. I've been waiting a long time for this, so I'm pretty excited.
Well, I'm excited too.
Good. I met you back in January on a cold day. We were doing it was a ghost tour, walking tour, and that was at Fort Vancouver. Tell me a little bit about your experience with Fort Vancouver, because I know that you have a special tie to Fort Vancouver.
Yeah. Well, the ghost walk itself was unofficial. The National Park Service does absolutely not approve of this, and so I do it only on special occasions for small groups of people, and I make sure I stay off of National Park Service land when I do it. And my history goes back actually almost to the day I was born. My father was an Army Reservist, National Guardsman, and he was stationed at the Vancouver Barracks. And later, in 1979, I joined the Army Reserves, and that was my first station. Was there at the barracks.
Wow, and you were only 10 years old. That's pretty amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. No, I was 17 years old when I enlisted, and I put in 32 years of service before I retired.
That's awesome.
Well, thank you.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, most of the time it was a pleasure.
Yeah. Most of the time.
Some of the time not.
Oh, I'm sure. Stories for another time.
That's right.
But so, tell me how you got started with writing, and then we'll get into these books that you've written.
Well, I worked as a professional archaeologist for several years, and archaeology and anthropology, it really deals with not only your history, but other people's history, Native American stories, legends. And I'd always been interested in the paranormal. I don't know if you remember an author named Hans Holzer.
Oh, yeah.
From the 60s.
Yes.
And I remember I used to metaphorically haunt the bookshelves at the public library waiting for the next Hans Holzer book.
Wow.
And so I was coming back from graduate school in England, and I was looking for little tourist things to bring home that didn't weigh very much or cost very much. And there's this one woman who published Ghost of Sheffield, England, volumes 1, 2, 3, and 4. And it was just a very simple 8.5 by 11 double-sided photocopy that she folded up and sold for the equivalent of $3 a piece.
Wow.
So I came home, and said, you know what? If this little old lady from Sheffield can do this, so can I. And that was my first book, which was actually a ghostly guide to Clark County. It was 64 pages.
Wow.
And it was all just ghost stories of Clark County. And it was a lot of fun.
Now, have you always been interested in paranormal?
I cannot remember a time when I wasn't.
Really? Did you have personal experiences growing up, or?
No, it's I sure wanted them.
Yeah.
And you all know, and your audience does too, if you hang out in these places long enough, the law of averages catches up with you.
Oh,
Right.
sure.
Yeah. And so,
Definitely.
yeah. So I'm not psychic
Or chases you.
Well, yeah.
or follows you home.
Follows. Yes.
Yes, follows you home.
I'm notorious for them following me. So.
Yeah.
And so when deciding to do these books, what made you decide to do these books in the first place?
Well-
and then let's name the first one. You'd name the 64-page book.
Right.
But after that,
It was Ghost Critters and Sacred Places of Washington, Oregon.
Okay.
And then Volume 2, Volume 3, A Haunted Tour Guide to the Pacific Northwest, now in its second revision, and Haunted Astoria. I'm starting to lose track. Weird Washington and Weird Oregon, which I wrote under contract to Sterling Publishing and ultimately Barnes & Noble. And
Wow.
the other books I wrote and actually self-published.
wow.
And so it was kind of interesting work for hire as opposed to, because you know what? I could have spelling errors and I wasn't responsible if they
Right.
made it through the editing team was.
Right.
That's
And,
awesome.
Yeah, and it's a hobby that does more than pay for itself.
And so now, did you actually travel to these locations yourself?
I try to travel to as many of them as possible. In some cases, and I try and make this clear in the books, and this is one of the things I always tell people, listen, when you read some of these people's ghost books, they're written as if it happened to the author that very day. And yet when I go to places, I find out, oh no, this haunted restaurant was torn down 20 years ago and we built a bank on the same site.
Right.
And that happened to me in Canada, actually.
Sure.
Oh my gosh.
And so sometimes I cannot, and if I can't, I try and explain why not.
Right. That's good. That's good for the readers to know.
Yeah, definitely. And so, in your experience, in all the places that, well, I'm going to wait till later for that
Okay.
question. And so, how did you find out about all these haunted locations? Did you read about them in other books, or was it hearsay, and then you called to verify, or?
It's a combination. The very first book, this being the 1990s, when people said the inner what, now you can go on the internet and find it proliferating like viruses. But the first book, when I left Ghost Critters and Sacred Places, I physically had to go to the locations because the information, a lot of times I would go to the local library and go to, they used to have these things called vertical files,
Yes.
which they don't have now, where the
The
librarians...
Dewey Decimal System?
Yeah.
That too. But the newspaper back files, usually Halloween editions of the local newspaper would have local ghost stories. I'd start from there and work my way around. And then after the first book, I got feedback. I do book signings and people say, how come you didn't write about this place?
Right.
And so I get referrals that way. Now with the internet, the actual danger is getting too many badly reported places.
Yeah.
Case in point, the Hot Springs Hotel in the east side.
Is it east of Camas?
No, I'm sorry, Eastern Oregon.
Oh.
Now I'm sorry. I'm sure somebody will...
Canita?
No.
Is
no,
it past Canita?
It is. Well, we'll get back to that later. I'm sorry. I'm sure somebody will actually be typing away right now.
Right. It'll be the trick question.
That's right.
Yeah, but...
If you know the answer, call into the studio.
Oh, LeGrand.
LeGrand.
Okay.
But I've actually seen
late.
almost identical story in LeGrand, in Burns, and people will just mix up which town.
Right.
So you have to really narrow down the location,
you
try
do.
to figure out where am I going. Any
Yeah.
place that has been like a place you were like, I'm not going?
Only at the wrong time of year.
Okay.
I don't like crossing the Cascade Mountains in January or February.
So
Right.
only weather related.
Usually.
Other than that, you're gone. You'll
Yeah.
go.
Well, there was the time when I was working for Weird Oregon and was visiting a locale, and there was a hurricane on the coast, and there I was actually walking this thin strip of cliff to get through the back way to photograph the Cape Arago lighthouse, and the Coast Guard helicopter flew by and kind of downdrafted me and said, "Leave the beach! Leave the beach! There is a hurricane approaching." And so, yeah.
Get out.
Yeah, you know what? I'd be less scared of the ghost.
Yeah, probably.
Do you do a lot of your own photography?
Yes, I do. And
That's nice.
Yeah. Well, for the archaeology work, archaeology research, it just so helps this part of it too, because we want to be treated seriously.
Right.
And so for archaeology, I learned to take pictures for building nominations for the National Register and try and pick out these details.
Right. And so I know for me, we did an investigation at Edgefield in Troutdale, and I wasn't nervous about going in for the investigation, although I did volunteer to spend the night by myself in one of the notoriously haunted rooms. What spooked me was being down, we interviewed the night auditor, and after the interview, I was looking through the ghost log and read all the stories about the room that I was staying in.
Not that it predisposed you.
Yeah, and
Prior to going to sleep.
yeah, so then I closed the book and go, okay, and so one of the camera guys, he left, everybody was gone, and so I walked up to the room, and literally I walked in the room and go, okay, here we go, because all those things were forefront in my mind because I had just read about all these horrific things that happen to people. And so I'm wondering, did you feel that way about going to do some research at a particular location, having read about it first?
Yeah, I try not to, and as some people would suggest, I don't have enough imagination to be frightened all too often. I can be surprised, and I try and treat it with a big grain of salt, in that, for the most part, when I talk to people, say, "Oh, the our house is haunted by a demon, and it grabbed me and threw me down the stairs." Okay, nobody's here. Are you sure you didn't just fall down because you were frightened? Well, and so I'm not so afraid of physical violence from the supernatural. Usually it is people let themselves get carried away.
Right.
So that doesn't bother me too much, and I'm open to it.
Now, do you consider yourself a skeptic?
No, I
No?
consider myself open-minded. Where I am on this is, when people come to me very sincerely and say, my house is haunted or this happened to me, I treat them with respect because they
Believe that.
genuinely believe it. Do I want to be disrespectful and debunk them and make fun of them? Absolutely not. Do I believe every haunting that's reported to me is a true haunting? I always try and treat this with a scientific outlook. Let's look at the possible and probable, and then go to the improbable, which then becomes a ghost. In my own house, I had some critter crawling through the walls and die. Oh, the smell of death.
Oh,
Oh,
wow.
yeah, that's horrible.
Yeah.
That's a horrible smell.
And so you can find enough legitimate scientific reasons for stuff to happen. And so I always look to that. And when I write about it, I try and point out the probable, possible, but even the debunkers themselves are narrow in their focus. So let's look at this theory that you have. Well, that really doesn't stand up to scrutiny either, these theories. It's like the old Bugs Bunny cartoons or whatever. Build a better mousetrap.
Right.
Mouse, cheese, string, come on, that's not likely either.
All right.
And so do you actually do paranormal investigations on your own, or do you do it with a group? Or?
I do it on my own. I found and I don't do that often because I try and maintain a certain standard, in that when I'm done, I turn over a book or booklet to the people. I keep a log of what happens. I keep a log of which photographs I took. If I'm doing electromagnetic field detection, I'll take periodic readings, even if I get nothing, so that the raw data can be quite lengthy. And since you've been doing investigations, for every hour you're in the house, you might spend 3 hours doing the documentation.
Yeah.
And so oftentimes I kind of scout the way. I get an interest, and I talk to other groups, and I may point them towards somebody, because I do the preliminary, which is interview the person, find out about the haunt, and try and find the history. And most teams usually have somebody who's just the researcher.
Right.
And so I can do it all. I just haven't had the time recently to put forth the effort.
It's really more than a one-man show. I'm impressed. That's a lot of work for one person.
You know, which is why I don't do investigations all that often.
You're sticking to the writing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you been in a location that was just over the top? You just couldn't explain scientifically or logically what was happening, and it would just more or less crossed into the paranormal?
Well, and it was the first place I ever visited seriously, which was the Vancouver Barracks Hospital, which now leads me to actually look at the camera and
Yeah.
say, the city of Vancouver owns the hospital, and they do not believe in ghosts. They won't let anybody investigate, and please don't try and break in, because I get phone calls
Oh, yeah,
from the city
definitely.
complaining. So, having said that, yeah, that was, and excerpts of it are up on my website. People don't actually have to buy the books. I mean, it was the first time I ever investigated. We had everything happen from camcorders going out when we were in the room. We'd leave the room and come back. You know, the camcorders start working again. At the very beginning, we synchronized our watches. Now we have cell phones, but we synchronized our watches with the clock on my car clock. And when we came back and left, all of our watches had a different time.
Whoa.
Then the car radio.
Whoa.
Table shaking under my friend, toilet seat lids going up and down between our visits.
I remember you talking about that on that tour.
Well, if people actually died up there at the barracks,
Oh yeah, yeah. A hospital.
Yeah.
One of the worst things that happened at the Vancouver Barracks was after World War I, as the troops are coming back from Europe, they bring the Spanish flu. And so, that had the unfortunate circumstance of actually attacking people between the ages of like 16 and 30. Usually the flu will get the little children and the elderly. And so all of these soldiers coming back on this post vectored and infected their same age group. And they had literally hundreds of people sick. And I don't know the exact number. I would say in excess of 24 people
Wow.
died. And the morgue in that hospital building is not that big. They were supposedly putting bodies in the hallway in the basement.
well, then you've also got the Columbia River and all the. Wasn't there polio that went through there, or there was another epidemic that had gone through?
At various times, in the Native American days in the 1800s, from the 1770s through the 1860s, every generation or so there would be yet a different or plague. One time it was probably malaria, another time it was the measles, another time, oddly enough, smallpox had already passed through.
Wow.
But for measles in particular, the Native American cure-all was a sweat lodge. You know, you build a little low lodge, you build a fire in it, you get hot rocks, you pour water on it. So if you've got the measles, you got a high fever, you're already dehydrated, and then you sweat it up, and then you run and jump in the river. And there was talk that the bodies were almost piled up at the mouth of the Columbia River. The ship's captains talked about that.
Wow.
As the native folk died and went through the Columbia River all the way out to sea.
Because there is a lot of activity down at the river,
Yeah.
and a lot of people who have houses down at the river. A lot of very expensive houses. A lot of interesting stuff happens, and then you've got. Well, it used to be the Chart House, and now it's Joe's Crab Shack, and I think Husong and Larry's.
Who's on
Yes.
Lions? Yeah.
And
And that's the former Army dock.
really,
Yeah, that's the Vancouver Barracks Army dock. And what part of Joe's Crab Shack, if you're looking at it from the front, it's got kind of an odd kind of roof pitch to it.
Yes.
And that's what's left of the quartermaster's shack or office.
Really?
It's incorporated into it. And I just came across records. You and I were chatting, and I have some military diaries with me that I was reading, and there's a note. Lieutenant so-and-so fell off the dock head first, hit the riverbank, and died.
Oh my gosh.
so you
wow.
could just be eating your snacks and
Yeah.
your cracking your crab, and all of a sudden,
Somebody else cracks your your stuff for you.
Yeah, your neck. Yeah.
Ah, my gosh. So the Vancouver Barracks Hospital, what year was it built? And when was it operational? From what time to what time?
Well, and this gets confusing. People who have the first book where I wrote about it, in an ideal world, you should be able to admit, I got some facts wrong without people coming down and being mean to you. This is an oddity. It was built 1904, 1905, but for some reason they used plans dated and drawn up in the 1880s. So in my book, I made the incorrect assumption with the facts I had, which was that it was built in the 1880s.
Right.
In reality, it wasn't. and it was in use as a hospital all the way from 1904 and 1905 up to the end of World War II, effectively.
Wow.
Even though to the north there was Barnes Army Hospital, where the VA hospital is now, they still had call to use it at various times. There was a lot of overflow, and
So essentially, Highway 14, it was not there. I mean, it
I-5.
was well, there's Highway 14 that's right at the Vancouver,
The interchange, I-5,
yeah, and then it goes to
14.
I-5 and that,
Yeah.
all of that.
Mhm.
So it went all the way down, essentially down all the way to the water.
the barracks, yes. The barracks, for the longest period, it was a half-mile wide and 2 miles long, starting with the Columbia River to the north. So for the ultimate size of the barracks, the northwest corner was where the post hospital, or the post cemetery is.
Oh, okay.
So when they built I-5, the highway department and the Army got together and they just took a strip of the Vancouver barracks and put in I-5. And you're right, Highway 14, which runs the south end. See, at various times it was actually open to traffic, and then the Army would block it off, then they'd open it up again.
Oh, wow.
There are various maps, particularly in the 20th century, that showed open, then closed, then open, then closed.
Wow. So yeah, because now it's another thoroughway
It is,
for people.
yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
you couldn't get into Vancouver or Camas or any of those towns without having that.
Yeah.
And you're separated by the railroad. When did the railroad go in? Because does the railroad, it doesn't go all the way down,
Well, actually, yeah, it does. It
goes past.
yeah. Remember, the railroad bridge is to the west of the interstate bridge. I honestly don't know. And again, I'm sure somebody who's a train spotter is going to email you with that very information.
Probably.
But in the early 1900s, they do have, for my military history work, we buy postcards. Because these colorized postcards from about 1895 to about 1920 are just amazing. And that there's a bill on the postcard, world's longest the world's longest steel locomotive bridge. And that's
Okay.
Wow.
So that's early 1900s at least.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the only thing that really separates the freeway from the water.
As far as the hospital, so
Mhm.
tell us a little bit more about some of the evidence that you captured and what was not.
You're really
easily-
fascinated on this
am.
hospital
You
thing.
got to understand when I went on that tour.
Was it in the hospital?
No. We
No.
didn't
Oh,
go
you
in.
can't get in now.
No.
No. He was talking about the history about it, and then I went up after you had talked, and I snapped a bunch of pictures through the window, and I was just hoping, come on, let something show up. Unfortunately, I didn't get anything. But
That
I'm
was the
curious.
thing against
But
the-
it's the typical, stereotypical haunted location, looking place.
So near and yet so far.
Yeah, exactly. We can
Against
look
the
at it from
windows.
afar,
Yeah.
but Yeah. So.
Well, one of the other things that we did, which was really fascinating, and again, bear in mind this is the 1990s, and so there are no digital audio recorders available commercially for people, and so electro voice phenomena is really as a tape recorder, and so in the what the Army calls a latrine, most people call a bathroom, the toilet seat lids went up and down between visits, and so on a later visit, my friend and I got some sealing clay and a special ring and put a tape recorder in there with a 2-hour tape, 1 hour each side. And every hour we came back and restarted the tape. And we started it at 10 p.m. And so...
And oddly enough, there was plenty of activity going on in the bathrooms.
That's right.
Oddly enough, it started at midnight. So, and again, getting back to the bad part about doing your own investigations.
Yeah. Do they have in the hospital, since you're stuck on the hospital,
Yes.
do they have original? I mean, like windows, is everything, how much of it is original from?
Much of it is, and when you visit the hospital now, it's a very long building, and it runs north to south. And if you're looking at it, it's kind of got like a little wider building at the south end of it. That is a separate building. When they were putting in I-5 in the 1950s, that building was actually over here, where I-5 is now. So they physically picked this building up and
Oh.
moved it over and attached it to it.
Wow.
But the buildings are still mostly original fixtures. They're brick buildings, brick and wood, and there were some modifications way back in the 19-teens, but essentially the interior, which is a concrete and brick shell, is intact.
Now, are any of those houses on Governor's Row? Are any of those? Have you been into any of those?
The Grant House and one of the other buildings, well, a couple of the other buildings.
They do a lot of them for weddings and stuff.
Right. The Grant House is for public events, and also in
Marshall.
the Marshall House. And I've been in the Marshall House numerous times, and they got to know me, and they would always say, no ghostly events happen in the Marshall House. Not since you came here, not before you came here.
Is there a reason for their names?
Well, it's one of these funny things. When George Marshall was here, he was here, the same guy who ran World War II for FDR. Just during the Great Depression, they stationed Marshall at the Vancouver Barracks, and he managed a lot of the Civilian Conservation Corps. And he was getting ready to retire when World War II started. And that's when he moved. But as the senior ranking officer, effectively the post commandant, they moved him into the coolest house, which was that great Victorian.
Okay.
Now, the Grant House is one of these historical laughing jokes because it's named after Ulysses S. Grant. And when they decided to put a name on it, which is in the 20th century, somebody got the idea that Ulysses S. Grant was the post commander. And indeed, he wasn't. When he was in the Pacific Northwest in the 1850s, he was a lowly lieutenant, then captain. And the Grant House was one of the first buildings built at the barracks in 1849, and it was the post commander's residence. When Grant was here, the post commander didn't like him. There's a guy named Bonneville. And so the only time Grant went up to the Grant House was to get yelled at.
Oh.
He was actually he actually lived at a place called the Quartermaster Ranch near the old apple tree, not too far from the dock in Housong Larry's.
Huh.
Wow.
And that building got demolished sometime in the 20th century, late 20th century. So,
Wow.
I hear so many stories about different military bases that have claims of hauntings, and of course, some of the shows have been to the barracks and out in Hawaii. So do you find now of course they don't claim that it's haunted, but in your opinion, the things that you've seen, things that you've documented, what is your opinion on the fort here?
Now, I don't know, you remember we exchanged some emails, and I said, it is not Fort Vancouver, it is the Vancouver Barracks.
Yes.
The separate components. You've got a piece of land that Europeans and Americans have been at since the 1820s. And so there was a very strict dividing line in time. The Hudson's Bay Company was there in the 1820s to about 1855. So that's Fort Vancouver to me.
Okay, right.
And the Army...
That's the one you can go into, and it's
The
got
stockade.
the stockade around it, and there's little houses inside of it, and
Yeah.
there's little fur pellets in there, and I've done the tour.
All right, very nice.
It was educational and informative.
Well, and a lot of kids go to. A lot of schools go in and do the tour
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, and so the Army component of that whole piece of the land, most people refer to as the barracks. And so Fort Vancouver, that compound and that Hudson's Bay Company component, I did have somebody who was a volunteer there over 20 years ago nudge me in the ribs and say that the cookhouse, they've got the McLaughlin House, the big white building, the chief factor's house, and because they use wood and coal burning stoves, houses tended to burn down. So they actually built separate cookhouses away from the main house. And so,
Well, didn't they at one point in time have a fire somewhere around there?
a couple times.
And there was a lot of buildings that had burned down.
Yeah, in the 1850s, the Hudson's Bay Company moved out, and shortly after they padlocked the gate, there was a mysterious fire and everything burned down.
Oh.
Wow.
But that particular building room, the way they would run the tour, and I'm sure you went through this too, the tour guide opens the door on one end of the building, and you walk down the stairs, and then they talk and show you how all the stuff was cooked, and then they encourage everybody to leave first, and then your guide will be the last one out. They'll look around, and then they will leave and lock the door behind them. And this particular informant of mine, who still wants to remain anonymous, said that he or she did that very thing, and then walking up the stairs, looking around, started going out the door and you're ready to lock it, and then there's a bang and a clash, and most of this pots and pans that are all neatly pegged up on the wall all came down and hit the ground, and
Wow.
and so
And nobody knew of the wiser, and nobody was like,
and again, my informant friend said that, talking to some others of the guides, that they said, oh yeah, this happens to us occasionally, not all the time,
we
but
have to go in and clean those darn pots and pans up again.
That's right. We need better hooks.
Do they have any idea who they think it might be? That's
no. Some of the old staff.
Hmm.
But so that's about the only thing I know associated, and it never been investigated with the Fort Vancouver.
so we could actually get on the tour. We just have to be just inconspicuous.
You like
Yeah, unofficial.
hide your EMF detectors.
Yes, and digital recorders.
yeah,
Could you say that again?
yeah.
Yeah.
Is there a place or a location? Sorry,
You didn't
kind of
lose it.
pulling out my mic here. Is there a place or a location that you were a little hesitant to write about or even investigate?
No. The only hesitation comes in, are the people upset with the current owners? And they're actually sometimes nowadays, as when I was revising the tour guide, when I put out the first tour guide in about 2001, I had to persuade people to let me write about them because they were afraid it'd hurt their business. Now, and you're familiar with this, please come and investigate and write about my restaurant.
Right.
It'll boost revenue, won't it? Everybody wants to eat in a haunted restaurant or stay in a haunted hotel room.
Right.
And so there have been some cases where I've been approached by people who talk about the long-standing ghost tradition. Usually the prostitute who's always seemed to be named Rose was murdered in 1905, and then I start investigating and find out there's no prior mention of this ghost named Rose prior to this current owner taking over.
Wow.
So I get hesitant for that reason. And then that promotes false ghost stories.
Yeah, that's true. And so have you found a place that you can't wait to get to investigate or to do the research for a book, or
Yeah,
any
there
place on the I hate to say bucket list, but on the top of your list?
there have been a lot of them. For a time, I used to go kind of cross country. You never saw me in the month of October because I was back on the East Coast
Wow.
visiting colleges, doing ghost talks and ghost walks on campus. I mean, you get these colleges. They're, quote, just city colleges, but they've been endowed for 300 years. They're in the New England states. And so I had a tremendous opportunity to visit some of these colleges, and some of them, are fascinating. Ball State University, of which Letterman is an alumni,
Wow.
the canning jar people.
Really?
They had their old main building, which used to be classrooms on one floor, and residents on the others. Had some weird things happen, but
I would think the library would be the scariest.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
just because of old books and people
you
reading.
saw Harry
things.
Potter, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I would just get that the library would be a good. That'd be my first stop.
Yeah.
Because it's quiet. Then who would want to be mischievous in a library?
Although we
course.
saw, remember the opening for Ghostbusters, the first Ghostbusters movie.
Oh, that's right.
Oh, maybe that's where it is
Yeah.
coming from.
Yeah, but to kind of answer more, I went to Fall River, Massachusetts, and the murder of the Borden family. That's a bed and breakfast now,
Yeah, I saw that.
and that was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And we
Wow.
had something weird happen too.
Really?
Yeah, it was. We stayed in the room where Mrs. Borden was murdered, and it was, when you talk about hauntings reactivating when you have similar circumstances, it was a very warm day. It was in the upper 70s, and so, of course, they were all killed on a very hot summer day.
Very warm, yeah.
And so I was taking pictures around the house, and in the room we were staying in, there's a mannequin with a dress from the original miniseries, and that was worn by Elizabeth Montgomery. And it's on loan, and so I was taking pictures, and then the camera auto shuttered, went five times, and I was like, what the heck's going on? See, I didn't swear. What the heck's going on? And being a digital camera, I went and looked. It did not actually take a picture. So I tried again. No picture. So I turned it off. 1001, 1002. Turned it back on. Auto shuttering. Took out the batteries. Now, they're solid state batteries. I don't know why I shook it. I did, and being a guy,
Yeah.
you won't get this. I sniffed it. I don't know why. Put it back in.
You're going to give away all the secrets.
This is what we guys do when women aren't around. And tried taking a picture.
Wow.
And meanwhile, my wife is laughing at me. And she said, Abby, Mrs. Borden, please let us take a picture. Click.
And it worked?
Click, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And yeah.
Wow.
Now, the camera had never ever done that before. It never did it after that until even when somebody stole it about 2 years later. But now, a skeptic might well say, and be semi-justified, it was really hot. You pulled the camera out of your car, so maybe the batteries got too hot. And that's a distinct possibility. Having said that,
Very strange, though, that you would ask for a request and then,
then
Yeah.
how
be able to
coincidental
take
is
the
that?
picture.
On
And,
cue.
and the fact is, I had the camera in my car before and it's come out very, very hot, and it's never done it either. So,
Wow.
So we know if the camera ever goes psychotic
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
We just have to ask for
Shake it,
permission.
sniff it.
Yeah.
Some people don't
The-
like to
the
have their
sniffing
pictures
part.
That's
taken.
right, the sniffing part.
They don't like their pictures taken. Sometimes you do have to ask.
Well, you know, we at the investigation. Well, I don't know why I'm telling you. At the investigation at Edgefield, you know, we had our whole team. I was the only one that stayed overnight, but before that, we did an investigation. And there's is it the caretaker's house that's right next door?
the overseer of the poor.
Overseer, yes. We're allowed access into that area, and then the top floor is a room that they rent out, and it's supposed to be very active.
The Althea Suite.
Yes, you already know. Jeez.
I stayed there once.
My goodness. Well, awesome. But we had a camera set up, and all of a sudden it just, boop, and it was a fresh battery. And so we had
But
no
we really
cameras.
didn't get much any activity up above.
No.
It was mostly the pictures that we did get was actually in the kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, but there really
The
wasn't.
kitchen and that one room that's lower, that lower room.
That one room
That had
that's
some
lower,
really weird-
I had a lot of. I was really drawn
Yeah,
down there for whatever reason.
yeah.
In the one bedroom, what was it? The one Adam and I were getting stuff in there.
Mhm.
There's a bathroom, and then it's the one like you come up the stairs and it's that one street. It's on.
Finish, and I'll tell you my experience there.
Yeah, that was. I think there's the willow one, and then there's that one right there.
It's
but
got kind of like a glass plate on the door.
the one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the one that I had to get into that room. And Adam and I spent a lot of time, and he kept getting stuff in the closet, but we determined that it was probably electrical that we were getting. So, but it was still, I just kept walking around that room and looking out that window.
But that lower room, we got a lot of. Even I got some of the same pictures the same thing that happened on my pictures.
So
that
this
you had,
was like
with the lines.
This was the next level up, the second floor.
Yeah, but this one, yeah. But it was odd because I was using my phone actually for the camera. I didn't even bother with the camera, and when I looked at the pictures, it had the lines, kind of like the.
Oh, that's the one that's over off
Yeah,
the
that
other
one.
way by the kitchens,
Yeah.
off to the kitchen side.
Anyway, so tell us your experience.
Well, my wife and I stayed there. It was January or February. I think it was January. And we did get the Althea Suite. And we were only able to stay one night. And we had to get out of there very early, even before breakfast, which just kind of kills you when you pay
Oh,
the
yeah.
room fee with breakfast.
Of course.
So I woke my wife up, and like, yeah, I'm up. So I went down to very quickly use the bathroom and shower. And I just finished up shaving and was just kind of getting dressed. And I heard what I thought was her walking down the stairs because the Althea Suite, you have to walk down the stairs, there's a door, and that puts you into that hallway where that room you were interested in is.
Yeah.
And the humidity was such that the door would stick. And she actually wasn't strong enough to actually open it without kicking on it and
Wow.
not wanting to pay for a kick.
Damaging.
Right.
Yeah, of course.
Damage
So,
door.
so I very quickly hurried out of the bathroom because I could hear her coming down the stairs, put my foot against the bottom of the door, embraced it, and then turned and pulled really hard, opened the door, and there was no one there.
Wow.
And I distinctly heard the footsteps going down, and it shares that same wall with the stairwell. And so I very quickly went upstairs, and she fell back asleep. She was laying back in bed asleep.
Oh wow.
So that was my experience there.
Yeah.
Wow. That's more than what happened to us. I didn't hear any footsteps.
Well, we did get some cool
But
pictures.
we did. It was a great stay. The staff there is amazing. The history of the place is intense.
Yeah.
We had to go
So-
in with the security guards, but they sat and stayed with us. And one of them, he ended up coughing so much he had to leave. But
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, one of the guards.
and see the guards and the night staff, like you found the night auditor, they're there so often that they see
know.
the stuff. Yeah. And let's face it, when you're looking for informants to tell you about this kind of stuff, most of the time the maid and cleaning staff aren't worried that they're going to get fired for telling the truth, because who wants their job?
Right.
So oftentimes they're very forthcoming.
Right. Now, did you spend the night at the Lizzie Borden house?
Yes.
You did.
Yes.
And so, what was it like? First of all, what was the feeling like when you first walked in? I can't even imagine. I don't know if it's because of everything I've read and seen, but what was the overall feeling when you walked into the home?
I was just impressed for many reasons. The historian, archaeologist, and appreciator of architecture was impressed, because that building, after the murders, Lizzie Borden lived there for a short time and then left. And it was various things, from a residence to a print shop. And so the current owners did a really good job. They had the crime scene photos as well as some other period photos, and most of the furniture had been sold off, but from those photos they redecorated in a very similar style.
Wow.
And they were honest enough to actually say, this is not the original. If you're a guest and you stay there, what happens is they ask you not to unpack, because they give tours on the hour every hour until like 7 o'clock. But if you're a paying guest, you get a special tour. That's part of your fee, and oftentimes it lasts like 2 hours.
Wow.
And each of the interpreters has their own theory. And they're, sometimes they will actually bring in a trance medium and a Ouija board sometimes. But that was the most impressive thing, was how honest they were about it, how good a job they did of recreating the look and feel, at the same time as not trying to pass it off as the original.
But aren't there some items that are in one of the rooms that actually did belong to Lizzie Borden?
Yes, there are a dress or two and a couple of what they used to call toilet articles, brushes, that kind of stuff. But most of the stuff was sold off
Okay.
at various times. You know, she still needed some of it when she moved to her other mansion. And then over the years, she and her sister never got married. They died within a couple weeks of each other, and the estate just, nobody knows where a lot of that stuff went.
Wow. That's a sad story, just the whole thing.
Yeah.
But just the historical value, and I can appreciate the architecture. I absolutely love the architectural parts of the house. And you know, I was watching something just recently where they showed they were doing an investigation at the house, and it wasn't you, but they were showing pictures of the actual crime scene,
Right.
and then showing the room the way it looks now. They did such a spot-on job with duplicating the furniture and just the whole decor, everything.
Yeah,
It's amazing.
about the only thing that's different is, for instance, I think it was the wallpaper. And originally, it was like a rose or flower print. They weren't able to replicate the original because they were big flowers, but they found a wallpaper that was smaller flowers.
Oh.
And the same thing with the carpet. It was very, very similar to the original one. But
do you think it increased the paranormal activity that went on in the house?
well, isn't it one of these things where if the setting is familiar, it seems to bring the haunt back? I would not be surprised. Well, and you've got the energy of everybody and the expectation. Now, the expectation can create, false haunts, or people get a little paranoid, a little iffy.
Sure.
But you still got this energy coming out of people.
Well, we've gone almost 45 minutes, and
Wow.
I've never announced the phone number to call in. I've been blasting it on Facebook, but if we could, back there, we're going to give out the phone number for the studio. But if you have any questions and you would like to talk to Jeff Davis or Elise or myself, please feel free to call. There it is, 503-667-7555. Again, the number is 503-667-7555, and we look forward to talking to you. So,
Too bad it's
Yes.
not 666.
yes, yeah, that would be
That would make it
paranormal.
easier.
Yeah, it would, wouldn't it? Huh? So, what do you have in the works now? So now you've got all these books on the paranormal, and what
Can
do
you
you
get
have?
them on iTunes, iBook?
No, I was ahead of my time. Back in the 1990s, I was trying to sell PDF versions of my books, and nobody would buy them. And
So can you still get a hold of these books, though?
well, yeah,
website?
in paper, my website, ghostsandcritters.com, and you can also get them to be good to the customers. I'm sure you can go to Amazon.com and get used copies too, but I don't get any money for that. Please help me.
Help the critters.
That's right.
And I do events and things, and I've been woefully not good in maintaining my website, but I'm trying to actually stay here Octobers these days, and so I like doing events with people. I can't promise to do Vancouver Barracks Ghost Walks because it'll get too much notice from the Park Service, but I do non-ghostly cemetery walks at the Army Cemetery, and if anyone has a paranormal group and they say, hey Jeff, you want to come and talk to us, I'm more than happy to do that.
I got to tell you, there's a huge difference between driving by and listening to somebody talk and actually doing the walking tour. And you're there, and what I liked about your tour is you bring so much history, obviously, to the stories, which really helps validate a lot of the stories, and it just makes it real. And you're standing there looking at the buildings, even though we couldn't go in. It was still fascinating to me.
Yeah.
So
and the Clark County Historical Society, who I'm friends with, in October they generally run a City of Vancouver ghost walk. So they've got Haunted Vancouver Ghost Walk too.
Yeah.
That would be a lot of fun.
Oh yeah. What I would love to do is take the haunted tour book and actually go on a haunted tour. I mean, if this is dream world, but be able to go through your book and just go to all these places, it would just be amazing.
Have you got anybody who's ever wrote you and said that's a bunch of bunkus and really actually very upset with you on any of the stories in your book? Yeah. You
try and treat people with respect. Years and years ago, there was a place in Newport called the Orr House Bed and Breakfast, and I was invited there by the owner at the time. This is in the 1990s, and he said, "Listen, many of my guests think this happened, and these are some of the stories they've told. The only thing kind of bizarre I've had happen is this." And so I wrote about it in one of my books as an article, and then I included it. And I contacted him. I always contact or try to contact the property owners. And he said, sure, put it in. And between my talking to him and actually the book going to press, he sold it. And the next owner said, I don't believe in ghosts, and because of that, I don't want to be a party to cheating people. She's the one who knows ghosts exist or don't. Well, the next time I revised the tour guide, I took it out.
Right.
And it was only about a year ago, bear in mind the first tour guide and all this is over 10 years ago, I got an email from a young man who said, you better really check your sources because you're absolutely wrong, or did you just invent this story? I want you to know that I wanted to buy that place and I can't buy it now. He was blaming for all kinds of things, insinuating I invented the stories.
Wow.
And I emailed back and said, listen, you don't know what you're talking about.
Right.
I was invited in by the owners, this and that. It turns out he was actually the grandson of the owners who first invited me. And so I had said, if I didn't print anything that wasn't told to me, I didn't invent anything, so if you're going to blame anybody, blame the previous owner who turns out to be your grandfather.
Wow. Yeah. That's touching.
The irony.
Yeah, I haven't heard from him since.
Well, I can imagine too. I mean, there's a way to clean a place. So chances are the owner after that did a very good job on getting whatever activity was out of there, get it out of there, and there probably wasn't anything at that point. Yeah,
or are you going to scare your 13-year-old, 12-year-old grandson with ghost stories?
Right. Yeah.
So.
It's amazing. I did a guest spot on another show here at the studio last Friday, and afterwards the crew, there's like 7 people, came up, and everybody wanted to tell me their paranormal stories. It's amazing how many stories there are, or how many things happen to people, And that's another show. We got to get a bunch of people to have all kinds of experiences.
A round table.
Yeah, the
big round table.
That's right.
Well, the next big event next weekend at Crypticon, which is the science fiction horror convention up in Seattle, there's a free paranormal component that is ghost hunters get together, very much like the recent one in Oregon City, and there'll be a lot of panels. That's free to get in. And there are going to be discussions, I think, Friday and Saturday both.
And that's next week?
Yep. All people have to do is look Crypticon Seattle 2014.
Okay.
And then you have to try and dig out the Paracon.
Okay.
That's what the Ghost Hunters portion is called.
Now, are you speaking there? Or?
I hope, if things work right, I'll be chairing a discussion group.
Nice. And then did you do one at the Ghost Conference out here in Oregon City?
I was one of the speakers. There were only 2 of us speaking Friday night. That was the opening night. And my talk topic was ghosts, why if they don't exist, we would invent them anyway.
Right.
Well,
All right.
as we struggle for legitimacy in this, and I pointed this out, I've got an anthropology degree, an archaeology degree, I'm a historian. That does not actually make me any more qualified to talk about ghosts and theorize about them than anybody else.
Right.
But to the outside world, they want to see letters after your name, and that's not fair.
Right.
No, because any normal everyday person has some of the worst experiences happen to them. So, have you actually got a chance to go over to the John McLaughlin house over there in Oregon City?
Before the Park Service took over management, I was there a couple times. I was friends with the Friends in the McLaughlin house. And now that it's part of the Park Service property list, they really kind of discourage it. Now, there are some folks from the original Friends of McLaughlin house that still talk about it and are more than happy to discuss it. So
I spent most of my childhood going up those back stairs and going up that escalator
Oh, yeah.
and running across to the John McLaughlin
did you see
house.
the little red-headed boy?
No, I was a little girl. I don't.
That's in the Barclay house, isn't it? Next
Yeah, but he's also been seen at the elevator, at the top of the elevator.
Who is the
That
lady
elevator was a little creepy at times.
Yeah, I bet.
We take the stairs, which is a long way down, might I say.
Yeah.
I don't even know how many stairs.
Who is the lady who used to be the curator there that back in the 90s who wrote a book?
Yeah, and she's the lady who
Is
was
that the
my
one?
primary contact.
Yeah.
I'm sure somebody will tell us.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, he. When I stayed at a bed and breakfast across the street from the McLaughlin house, and of course, I'm staring at it through the window. The next day, I went over and talked, and I can't help myself. I got to ask, so is this place haunted? And the lady proceeded to tell me that yes, these are things that have happened, and went along the list. And then she said that she even felt compelled to write the book by Dr. John McLaughlin himself, which I felt very. That was kind of interesting. The Indians back in the day, his nickname was the Silver Eagle,
or gray-haired eagle,
yeah, something
yeah.
like that. And the family kept asking her to write the story, and she wasn't sure she was going to. And then she ended up at a library to do some research and thought, do I really want to do this? And then she looked up, and there was a white-headed eagle inside the library, up at the top of where the sun part is. And so she felt that as a sign. Okay, I need to write this book. And so it's very, very interesting. Great book.
Yeah,
But,
there's a lot of history on it.
if you ever get a chance, go to the Ermatinger House. I don't know if you know, I'm sure you know about the Ermatinger House. That's where the famous coin toss was, whether this was going to be Portland or Boston. And of course, Portland won, so it became Portland.
I thought it was Mr. Gresham who won.
Mr. Mr. Gresham. And so there's some paranormal activity in that house, plus the Stevenson Crawford house, which is right next door. I actually had a picture and there's claims of a boy looking out the window at the Stevenson Crawford house. And so I had a Polaroid back then, and took Polaroid pictures, and sure enough, you could see in the kitchen window that was facing the Ermatinger house, a boy's face. And so, anyway.
Yeah, well, the Ermatinger house, of course, is closed now.
I didn't know that.
That's the one across from the Pioneer Center.
Yes.
Yeah, and last year at the Oregon Ghost Conference, it was closed up. And one of the ghostly happenings is people will see smoke coming out of the chimney, and they actually disconnected and removed the stove.
Right.
And last year, not this year, but 2013, I got early for the Ghost Conference, and I was parked there. And as I was watching the Ermatinger house, sure enough, there was smoke coming out of the chimney.
Really?
And it was one of these literally, there's like an alley next to it. So I look down to see this car coming out of the alleyway. I look up, and there's no more smoke.
Wow.
So
Wow. And that's a pretty old old location. 1845, I believe, is when it was built.
Yeah, I don't think that's the original site. They
No.
moved it, but
Right,
yeah.
but the house itself, the structure.
Yeah.
Well, even Dr. John McLaughlin's house was moved.
Yeah.
Which is amazing in itself,
Yeah.
how they moved that house all the way up the hill because it was down by the river.
Right, right. And when it was a police station, the Ermatinger house, at least one person died there.
Wow.
No, Rocky and William have a lot of stories to tell about that place.
Wow. So many haunted places and so,
So
much
many
history.
things to remember.
Oh my gosh, so much stuff going on.
I can
Well,
barely remember my own birthday. Or the kids, for that matter.
or your name, or Yeah, I
Who
get
am
that
I?
way. Yeah. Do you ever walk into a room and go, I can't remember why you went in there?
Yes.
I do this all the time.
Then I go back to where I started from.
Yeah. I try to retrace my steps.
So how can
thinking
people
that
get a
something
hold
will
of this books?
Well, you know what? Let's. I know that they're going to roll the contact information during the credits, which will be here in just a few minutes.
Sure.
But again, tell us how we can find out more about you and more about the books that you've written, and
Okay.
read all we can.
Well, my website is ghostsandcritters.com, one word, all spelled out. And actually, if you don't want to buy the books, I've been told that if you print it out, it's over 100 pages long.
Oh my
It has
gosh.
a collection of ghost stories from other people. It's got a little bit of thoughts on ghost hunting, I call it, methodology, examining things, and the technology. And I've got a section of other people's ghosts. That hasn't been updated in over a year, but people would send me ghost stories, and I would every other month post them so that you can read about other people's experiences.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool. Wow, you've got so much going on, and you do a lot. And these books are awesome. In fact, that's where I first read about the White Eagle Saloon.
Mm-hmm.
I think I told you at another time. And so that was my first McMiniman experience, was going to White Eagle.
I
And,
think that we should probably let people know, though, in reading the books, though, that they should probably double check,
Yeah.
make sure they're still open if they want to go to the locations, if they're charging fees.
Very true.
Yeah.
Very true. The books are getting dated so that when somebody reads them, if it sounds like it happened just yesterday, that's because maybe the book came out in 2000.
All right.
Right.
Need some updating.
Yeah.
So, well, that's exciting. I would like to go on a. We were talking about our group doing a Highway 26 mountain investigative tour. We have several haunted locations that we're in contact with, or some of them we're going to contact. And I'm sure you probably have heard of some of the places, but we're
Secretly, I'm
not going to mention it now. But
I'm going to be looking for Bigfoot.
okay, well, you're gonna look for Bigfoot. I'll look for aliens and ghosts, and yeah, we'll just make it.
We'll just come together.
Yeah, we'll just come together.
I'll
with
be
the whole
out
thing.
doing the
That's
big
right.
wing.
Everybody knows Bigfoot's a space alien. It was
That's
on
right.
the $6 Million Man.
That's right.
Did they have a show where they said it was $1 million to get actual footage or catch Bigfoot? There was a show on not too long ago.
Oh,
But it was like to capture.
I'm pretty well convinced that they did, but I'd like to see the bond notice from the
They
underwriters.
can never
That's right.
find him. They can't.
Well, I'm going to close out the blog talk. So thank you again.
Oh, my
I
pleasure.
appreciate it, and it's been a pleasure
Thanks.
talking to you. And
Thank you, too.
And an honor to have you here. And so hopefully we can have you back on again sometime. Or
Yeah,
you
I'd like that.
Yeah.
agree to come back and bring some of the pictures maybe you've taken and
Sure.
some of the evidence and stuff.
Yeah, and yeah,
Give
more.
us an update. If
Yeah.
you got a new book coming out, we can look forward to getting our hands on.
Well, I'm not
Absolutely.
teaching college this summer, so whether it be the Oregon coast or Vancouver itself or up in the Puget Sound, I think I'll be working on one.
Awesome.
Wonderful.
Well, I look forward to it. Well, thank you again for being here. We definitely appreciate it. And happy hunting. All
Too bad
right.
you weren't able to end on happy hunting.
Happy hunting.
Yeah, you did better than me. I've been talking for 5 hours today, though. So.
You did awesome, man. And